if you don't have colossal errors in that phase of the game. And this is not the first time this has been an issue. We already saw it happen a couple times this year. 2021 was known for its special teams catastrophes. After that year, they didn't bring back the coordinator, Richard Hightower. But one thing about 2021, Tim, is that they figured it out to a certain extent by the end of the year. And then the biggest irony of all time was that they went into Green Bay and they won because of special teams.
Well, Green Bay was the one special teams that was ranked lower.
That was ranked worse, right? Exactly. So there's one team that's ranked worse this year, and it's the Tennessee Titans. And
there we go.
They're not going to play them in the playoffs.
Yeah, they face the Titans in the Super Bowl. We know what to look at. I think what the fans' angst is compelling about, and I know, listen, they want to hear Kyle to throw himself on the ground and explain how terrible they are. That's not happening. That's not who he is. It's not who the 49ers act. But the 49ers know that these are grievous errors that really could come back. And as I've already haunted them this season, just go back to the Rams game, the special team screw-ups in that game. And if you do them against good teams in December, you're either not going to get the playoff position you want, you're not going to get in the playoffs, or if you get in the playoffs and you start screwing up, you're going to lose. So they know that. I don't know if they can turn it around. They're not firing Brian Schneider. There's no one there to replace him. They don't make a midseason firing just to make the fans feel happy, just to satisfy the urge of punishing somebody. You got to make yourself better. But I think they're going to have these questions all season and going into the playoffs. I just think so. And we got a question on the Colin Seymour. I saw one just related to special teams. I want to kind of answer. He goes, you guys always mention Shanahan doesn't care about special teams. With the struggles all season, can he begin caring? It's hard just to say he only wants special teams just to hold serve and not mess up his entire coaching career and believe that. And then all of a sudden say, oh, now, wait a minute. Now I care. He does not care about the details of special teams. He's immersed in the offense. He is talking to defensive players and defensive coaches. He's involved in that too, not specifically like he is in offense. He just doesn't want to spend brain power on special teams. Where it's backfired is you can't just aim for that and start screwing up even from there. You need them not to screw up. You don't need huge positives from them, except for field goals and cover it well. But you can't just say, I just want them to hold serve, give me the ball back and let my offense score, and then have them be screwing up. Because then you're losing 60 yards, 40 yards at a time. These are massive field turning plays. These are game turning plays that they're not achieving. So it's hard for him to make that switch. So he's going to start sitting in on Brian Schneider's meetings now? Is he going to start running the special teams practice? He doesn't know what to tell special teams players every situation. This is kind of a culture thing. He believes in focusing on the offense and then also, making sure the defense is well coached. If you don't care about the special teams, sometimes it shows up in big and bad ways, and that's what we're seeing.
Just rudimentary math, 3 missed field goals, that's 9 points, and then I don't think Tampa Bay scores that first touchdown if they don't muff the punts. That's 7 more points. That's 16 points. 9 of those 16 attributed to Jake Moody missing field goals. So just parsing this, Moody was coming off the high ankle sprain. I think that has to be factored into how we analyze things. Obviously, for the 49ers, they factor that into. Kicking is something, it's a very, very mental thing, first of all, but it's also a rhythm thing. And he had a hiatus and he was coming back off the injury. If he has similar struggles this week, though, there is no more runway time. I don't think the 49ers can afford that. They obviously were able to afford one game. They won anyway by the skin of their teeth. But you have to look at the 9 points that they gave up because Jake Moody was maybe rusty coming off the high ankle sprain, and that needs to end. Now, they need Moody to – I mean, he can miss occasionally, but he can't miss 3 in one game. And then there's the muff. And the problem is that wasn't the first time that happened this year. Against Minnesota, Jacob Cowing muffed a punt. This one, probably more on Darrell Luter Jr. It is a legal play. It's a complicated rule, but it's a legal play. For him to be blocked into the returner. That's why the returner has to yell to try to get his blocker out of the way, and Luter has to do what he can to avoid the returner.
Yeah, he probably shouldn't get pushed back 20 yards.
Yeah, and he got pushed back straight into him. With Luter, the one in the Super Bowl was, I thought, an extremely bad break. I mean, that ball was away from the returner, hits him in the calf. It's unfortunate for him that his career is now synonymous with two really, really bad plays on punt return, including one that might have cost the 49ers a Super Bowl. People were asking me, Tim, are they going to cut Luter? It's like they actually view him as one of their corners of the future. He
Yeah.
hadn't had a chance to play on defense during a game yet. So, no, they're not going to cut him. But
I might
so
remove him
far,
from that position.
yeah, remove him from that
Yeah.
position. That might be a start. They signed McLeod, Nick McLeod, has 704 special team snaps in his career. Good gunner. He's going to be on the practice squad. So if they feel a desperate need to get somebody more experienced in there, I know Chris Conley should be coming back this week. He's a good gunner, but maybe McLeod is used as an activation, like a practice squad elevation. They have 3 of those with him this year. And I think you got to get vets in there, experienced players in there, because somebody like Luter, even though he has played in a big game in special teams, he's still only a second-year man. And they are relying on a lot of rookies who are doing a great job on both offense and defense. But I think sometimes the details of special teams, that's where, maybe forego a little bit of athleticism and youth and go with the guys that just aren't going to screw the play up.
Yep. The ball seems to find Luter on very key situations where he's not supposed to be touching the ball or be around the ball. It's just fate sometimes, but it's also what happens to sloppy special teams. You get bad breaks when your players are in the wrong position, much more likely than if they're in the right position. So,
yeah, make your luck on special teams.
Absolutely.
And so
it's just the fact that it keeps happening to them. It's not coincidence. Like, it's not random that it keeps happening to them.
And I will say too that there just has been severe inconsistency. It's not like they've been bad every single game. The Dallas game, Dallas has the top special teams unit in football, and they outplayed them.
Yeah.
So if you ranked they rank, the DVOA says they're 3 on offense, 4 on defense, and 31 on special teams. If you rank 31 on offense or defense at this part of the year, that's a much bigger problem, because you're not turning that around to the point where you could be a mediocre team. I think you're bad at this point if you rank that low, unless there was an injury involved. With special teams, there is much more game to game variance. So I personally don't think that asking for mediocrity is too much. I would hope that the 49ers aren't thinking that either, but
it shouldn't. That's what they're going for now, I think. Just not screw up.
Don't screw up.
When it's just not screw up, that's when guys screw up, because they're just thinking, don't screw up, don't screw up. That's like, we'll get to the Moody, Tabor Pepper, Debo Samuel thing. And I've heard people say, it seems pretty clear what Debo was yelling. It was lock in, make it, lock in. But yeah, what's so bad about that? You know what's bad about that? That's implying that he hasn't been locked in. That's implying that he has to hear it from someone in order to take it more seriously. And if you're a professional athlete, you're saying that's what Pepper was yelling back. Of course we got this. We're ready. We'll make it. Don't tell us to lock in. We're locked in. We're just missing. So not a major thing. The camera catches it, so that's bad. You don't want 2 players, touching each other, like pushing each other on the sideline. But I just heard, what's so bad about lock in? And I think Kyle even implied that. No, do you run up to Brock Purdy after he throws an incomplete, say lock in? He's going to say, damn it, I am locked in. It just was one play. So I just wanted to push back on that a little bit. When I have not played a ton of team sports, but when I have, if someone yells at you, I did yell at that once at a quarterback when we were playing flag football, and the quarterback got pissed at me. It's like, of course we're trying. Of course, what do you think I'm doing out here? So that's the emotion. I just want to put that out there. I not that it's competitive. I get it. It's fiery. Maybe it did get him more focused. He did although he almost missed that last one. Saying lock in to somebody on a professional football field is not the greatest thing in the world after a miss.
You know why it resonated so much and took off with 49ers fans, though? I think it's because fans were sitting there yelling at their TV because special teams was costing the 49ers so much. And then they saw Debo doing what they wanted to do. They wanted to go yell at Moody and Tabor Pepper. So I think that it was just an embodiment of, there's this massive gap right now between what special teams is doing, Moody, and obviously the return issues, the coverage issues, and everything else. And there's this big gap.
Again, and this is a super talented team, that almost lost this game because of that. Those frustrations I understand. Players should not act like fans to teammates. That's the point. And even Debo acknowledged that.
Yeah, that's something that Kyle Shanahan said that he hoped they would take care of, squash it. He said they hoped they would squash it on the plane, and sounds like they did. So they'll move forward
But
here.
can you
Going
imagine?
into
Can you imagine Moody yelling at Debo if he drops a pass? Of course, it would never happen because it's Debo and he's a star and he's a made man in the 49ers. But like, just think of that. Like, that would never happen, and it should never happen. It can't happen. I think Moody would be cut if that happened. But just think of it that way. Lock in Debo. Can you imagine anybody ever saying that to Debo? It wouldn't happen. But it shouldn't happen. That's why.
it's one of the curses of special teams is that you have such limited reps,
Yeah.
right? And the 49ers and Moody got very lucky that they got the opportunity to send Jake Moody back out there to win the game, because this is a whole lot uglier if they lose that game and he doesn't get that final opportunity
No.
at redemption. So
Oh my God, yeah.
there's a lot of times when stuff goes wrong on special teams and you don't get to go back out there to make amends, and they did. But the reason they were able to go out there and make amends was because, I mean, there was just some sensational play from both teams down the stretch of this game. The McCaffrey catch on oh gosh, that Purdy throw while he was just getting obliterated by William Golston, the rainbow throw, that was top notch. And then 4 plays later, Purdy scrambled. Vita Vea, who's 350 pounds, was about to floor him, and he threw that ball to Kittle. Kittle toe tapped into the end zone. And then defensively, 49ers made some important plays, but so did the Bucks. I mean, Baker Mayfield with the stiff arm on Nick Bosa, that
That was
was something
amazing.
you
That
never
was
see.
yeah, that was amazing.
And at the end, the 49ers needed some unheralded heroes to hold Tampa Bay out of the end zone to set up the game-winning drive where Jawan Jennings and Ricky Pearsall went crazy. There's Evan Anderson, the rookie defensive tackle, at the tackle for loss on 2nd and goal. And then when Renardo Green, who's been so good, another rookie, the cornerback, went out with a foot injury, Rocky Yassin, who's a veteran who's played a lot of football, he came in cold turkey and on 3rd down made a pass breakup right at the goal line. If the 49ers don't make either of those two defensive plays, there's a good chance Tampa Bay scores a touchdown, and San Francisco doesn't have time to set first they would need
They
a
have to score. Yeah,
touchdown.
they'd need a touchdown.
It
Yeah,
wouldn't
they
be
would
a
need.
Jake Moody situation. Yeah.
Yep.
So it's a team sport, and you've got to have everybody pulling their weight. And the 49ers, by the final 2 minutes of this game, or probably by the final 4 or 5 minutes of this game, did have everybody pulling their weight, and that's why they were able to get the win.
Yep. Okay, let me read you a question from Prof. Tom. Why do so many passes by Brock get tipped?
So I was ready for this because I saw him ask, and I went to the numbers, and I'll look at last year's numbers in a second, but he's only had 4 tipped this season, and that ranks 18th. Patrick Mahomes has 5 tipped this season. Bo Nix has 9. Kirk Cousins has 9. Lamar Jackson has 8. Caleb Williams 8. Baker Mayfield 8. Aaron Rodgers 8. Josh Allen 7. That's a big quarterback. So Purdy actually hasn't had that many balls tipped this year. Now I could go to last year, so let's see where this kind of stereotype is coming from, because maybe there is some truth to it in the past. Last season Purdy was 5th most in the league with 13. So I see why people might think that, but it seems like that conception might be unfair because he hasn't had nearly as many tipped this year. And you know what? The pass protection has been a lot better this season on the right side. Burford was not good last year. McKivitz was not good last year. I don't think McKivitz is great this year, but he's much better working next to Dominic Pooney, who's been a massive upgrade. And I think that's really helped Brock Purdy not have as many passes tipped.
Yeah. Also, obviously not a taller quarterback, so you're always going to be alert to that. They throw so many routes over the middle, and we didn't see a ton of it. I think maybe early in the season. We're seeing more of it now. You will see more of it with McCaffrey on those choice routes. We see him, like there was one clear one where it's just Purdy just waiting for him to make his move against a linebacker, and then he hits him cutting over the middle. I think Ted and Wynn calls them juke moves. Maybe that's what the NFL coaches call them. But you throw it over the middle. That's where the defensive linemen are. That's where the really big ones are. Right? The defensive tackles are the big ones. And that's where you're more likely to get deflected. We saw what Steve Spagnuolo did against 49ers, has done frequently, is blitz up the gap, right? You're blitzing up the middle. You are getting right in his face on some of those favorite routes. And those tend to be the ones most likely to be tipped. So, yeah, it happens. I think teams really try to play for that with Purdy, but it doesn't happen as much as I think people think it does, because you really notice it with Purdy because you're thinking shorter quarterback. That's what he's exposed to. The yards and the passing yards. I think he's 2nd in passing yards in the NFL, total passing yards or yards per game, something like that. It's way up there. He's always up there in yards per attempt. Obviously, if he's getting a ton of pass is tipped, that's 0, and he's way up there in average yards per pass. This is a very effective passing game. It's just not been a very effective offense in the red zone. Again, was 1 for 3 for scoring touchdowns on Sunday. But David and I both are on the same thing there. Every time they get a first down inside the 20, they run the ball for 0. It's every time. I swear I've been noticing the last 3 or 4 games. When they get more than 2 yards, it's a big thing for them because it's usually 2nd and 9 or 2nd and 10. They just
And
get
they dig
stuck
their own
on it.
grave.
And they don't throw on first down once they get in there. I'm sure Shanahan can get dinged for lack of creativity. He really believes in running the ball in the red zone because that's what pushes defenses back. That's how you gain the toughest yards, but they're not doing it. I think they got to get away. I think Kittle, Brady on the broadcast said he'd run McCaffrey 3 times on that last one. And I'm thinking in my mind, I'd throw it to Kittle 3 times because running McCaffrey, running in the red zone, this is back to Jordan Mason. This has been everybody for them. It's been hard going for them to run the ball, especially on first down in the red zone. They should just throw the ball, misdirection, something. Shanahan doesn't love doing that in the red zone because he thinks it's a sign of weakness. You want to make sure they have to defend your strength, but I think they got to start doing it because they're getting nothing on those runs in the red zone.
And then you've got 2nd and 9, 2nd and 10, and you're immediately into a obvious pass situation. So opposition's dropping more into coverage. They have less ground to cover. Incompletion puts you in a high pressure 3rd and 10, and that's a low percentage play. I think it has a tremendously bad domino effect when they're not picking up yards on first down. So, I agree with you there. Back to the Purdy throwing over the middle. He's developed as a feel for manipulating the pocket. Remember his rookie season in 2022? He would run around, but we talked about a couple weaknesses. One, the most glaring one was whenever he was pushed out of the pocket to the left, then he just wasn't as accurate, didn't see the field as well when he had to flip his hips back around. And many times when he did escape the pocket to the left, we noticed when we were watching the tape, why did he leave the pocket? He could have just stepped up in the pocket. It looked like it would have been clean. If he just manipulated that interior space a little bit better, things would have worked out. And that's exactly where Purdy has improved. The play that preceded Deebo Samuel yelling, or a couple plays before that, but that preceded Deebo Samuel yelling at Jake Moody and Tabor Pepper, was a Deebo catch and run, where if you watch the end zone angle, it was just beautiful from Purdy. He was pressured from the left, and instead of trying to bail, he actually just slid ever so slightly in the pocket, and he made a bit of a jump throw over the middle. And, the reason I bring it up is that's the kind of throw that can get tipped because the pocket is collapsing around him. But he found a way to maneuver his body, to lean, and then as he jumped and threw, to squeeze that ball through to Deebo Samuel, who caught it and ran about 20, 30 yards after the catch to set up the field goal attempt that was missed. So that's a play that I think got buried under the radar because of what happened after that. But it did showcase what Brock Purdy has improved at. And I think that we can also segue that into these red zone issues. If Purdy has become so good from the pocket, let him do it on first down, especially since defenses are clearly expecting them to run at this point because he's such a weapon for the 49ers. And the last thing you want to do is back him into a corner where the defense knows he's going to pass, and no quarterback is going to have a high success rate in those situations on 2nd and 3rd down.
Yep. Yeah. Throw it to McCaffrey. If you got to get to McCaffrey, throw it to McCaffrey. George Kittle has been electric in the red zone. An absolute, can elevate, can go get the ball. Like you've got some red zone targets. I can imagine they're going to do more of that. I was going to jump one last Moody thing. It just strikes me. I was going to mention this earlier. We'll see what Shanahan's confidence level is if they get to another 4th and 3, like they were before his second miss. Moody's second miss, and go, okay, let's go for it. And I think it was like the 36, whatever it was. No, it was like the 33, and go for it. Like, go for it. You got a good quarterback. Like the teams with the good quarterbacks are the ones that go for it on 4th down more, shockingly, because they got a better chance to do it. Shanahan has not tended to do that very often in his coaching career. He thinks he's got the better team, so just take the field goal. If you're not so sure about your field goal kicker, maybe you go for it on 4th and 2. Maybe I think he has a big difference in his mind between 4th and 1 and 4th and 2. I understand that, but I think 4th and 3 is gettable with Christian McCaffrey. You've got the threat of the run still. You probably aren't going to run it, but you can throw it to him. You can throw it to Kittle. You can throw it to whoever.
Purdy can
And you've got
run too.
Purdy could run it. Like I just think fourth at that point, I would have gone for it. That was before the second missed field goal attempt. I was thinking, go for it. We know this. Once Moody starts missing them in games, he tends to miss a lot of them. Like he misses in bunches because he's adjusting, right? We know what that is on the golf course. Let's see if Shanahan goes for it on some 4th and 3s at the 35, 38, whatever. Those are still long field goals. We're in this world where 50-yard field goals are nothing, and I do believe that's why you've drafted the guy. 50-yarders are very makeable for him, but he didn't miss a 49, a 50, and a 44. Those are not dinky ones. Those are like the 39 he missed in the Cleveland game last year. That should have been an automatic. These, at least a few years ago, would not have been automatic. With Moody, there's no question you are expecting him to make those, though.
Well, and let's just zoom out too. He made 84% of his kicks his rookie year, which is right middle of the pack. Robbie Gould, his rookie season, I think made 82%. So you got to give kickers some time to acclimate. And he had only missed one this season prior to the high ankle sprain. So signs were that Jake Moody was moving in the right direction as far as kicking efficiency went. They were trusting him with 50-plus yarders. I know the whole league has been kicking those 50-plus yarders better than ever. I think the Monday Night Football, they said 75% this year for kicks of over like 51 or 52 yards. It's wild. But Moody was heading in the right direction. Then he suffered the high ankle sprain, which is, by the way, that's tied to special teams failures. Why is your kicker? Yes. They had kickers injured in consecutive weeks, Tim, trying to make tackles. That's an indictment of what they're doing on the.
Well, their kickoff coverage is horrendous. That's one of the reasons why Moody's important for them, because he does most of the time kick it for touchbacks. That one time he kicked it short, mishit it. And the coverage team blew it again, and Moody was there, had to make the tackle, and gets hurt. That's a failure across the board. But you do need a kicker that can get it there, because the kickoff coverage team is so terrible that you can expect a kicker to have to make a touchdown saving. They did in back-to-back games, and they got kickers hurt in back-to-back games. So that's another reason why they're going to stay with Moody, at least for a little while.
Yep. So, and if he goes out 3 for 3, 2 for 2 against Seattle this week, then I think it would be rational to look at the game against Tampa and say, relative to the rest of the season, this was the game where he was coming back from injury and there was still some rust. Now, if it continues to slide, then you have another conversation. 49ers actually have another kicker on the roster. Matthew Wright's on injured reserve. That's one of the kickers that got injured on coverage, although that would lead to an interesting question, because you only have 8 return from IR spots. Would you use it on the kicker that you already have on the roster, or would you try to sign a guy off the street? Anders Carlson, who didn't miss a field goal for the 49ers, but missed an extra point against the Chiefs, is now on the Jets practice squad. So theoretically, they might be able to poach him, sign him to the 53. But I mean, we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's see what happens here on Sunday. It's funny, Tim, the first question, it was like 5 seconds in. This guy, Colin Seymour, I think had it ready to go. It's the one you already read. He asked about special teams and Shanahan not caring. I know you answered that. You got to Professor Tom, why do so many passes by Brock get tipped? Well, we kind of debunked that, but also talked about why he had so many tipped last year. Raul says yardage and points do not equal out. Before this Tampa Bay game, the 49ers were second in yardage and sixth in points. I'm not sure that might have actually grown, that discrepancy, after this game. So yes, that's true. It's mainly because of red zone issues and the special teams issues. Warren is happy that we're expanding across media platforms and models. And Warren does have a question about Schneider. This could be our last special teams one. Doesn't Kyle have one of the most respected special teams coordinators? This is a good one. This is a good overarching one. Brian Schneider led really good special teams units when he was in Seattle over the 2010s. I still remember calling up Richard Sherman right after the 49ers hired Schneider, because this was a big issue after 2021 when they didn't bring back Richard Hightower. And Sherman was unequivocal. He said, this is a really good coach. Look at three of the top special teams units in the league, Tim, are Detroit, Pittsburgh, and the Chargers. That is Dan Campbell, Mike Tomlin, and Jim Harbaugh. To me, I think special teams, regardless of who the coordinator is, they have the head coach. If you want to have a great unit, I think it is a cultural thing. And between Tomlin, Campbell, and Harbaugh, you've got 3 of the old school rah-rah football guys that I think might be conducive to that high level special team success. For the 49ers, that's okay because they don't need awesome special teams. Again, we go back to what we were saying. They just can't have it be terrible.
Yeah, and those are three coaches. Two, all three of them. They're line of scrimmage guys. They're guys that don't want to give away yards. And not saying that Kyle Shanahan wants to give away yards, but it's just not focus of the roster. It's not the focus of practice. It's not the focus of where his mindset is. And sometimes that permeates. Okay, it's not the coach's focus. You're going to make this team. You're going to make it by doing something else other than special teams. Now that may not be true. I think there are players on this team who have made it. George Odom by playing special teams, but it's just not the thing that the coach preaches all the time, and it trickles down. Now, listen, Shanahan and Lynch will say we've had so many different injuries, we're rotating different players through special teams, and it's hard to get them all together. Well, you know what? Other teams have injuries too. I get what they're saying. We see younger players out there, but other special teams coaches and other head coaches have figured out how to do that when they have injuries. Also, everybody has injuries. Everybody gets decimated. Look around the league. You see the Tampa Bay receiving core absolutely decimated, and you just got to gut through it on whatever format you got. So this is a lot of special teams talk. I get it. I get why normally a special team story just dies. David, you want to write a special team story? No one will read. Now it's everything. Everyone wants to know special teams. I get it. I understand it. It's just funny to me because knowing that special teams almost always is not the way to go in anything like this.
All right, we promise no more special teams talk. And Mac has set us up well here in the Q&A. He said Debo's not breaking runs or yak this year. And I would say, well, I don't think the 49ers in general were breaking a lot of yak this year up until very recently. And this past game, they had 179 yards after the catch, and Debo Samuel led the way with 40. And I don't think it's a coincidence. Christian McCaffrey was back, and the offense just takes on different spacing rules when Christian McCaffrey is back. Brock Purdy was throwing the longest passes on average in the NFL, and he was taking the longest time to throw in the NFL over the first half of the season. And so much of that was because they didn't have that running back outlet that they trusted, like Christian McCaffrey. And opponents were dropping a lot of guys back in coverage and just playing top down to stop the yak attack. So what the 49ers were trying to do is try to throw over it. They were going deep a lot, and they were throwing deep middle a lot, those intermediate passes, but they didn't have the short game, the more West Coast component of Kyle Shanahan's offense that had them at number one in yak over the past few seasons. In fact, they were number 32. They're dead last entering this past week. But what we saw offensively, structurally, with Christian McCaffrey back, regardless of the red zone struggles, but what they did in between the 20s, Tim, looked a lot more familiar, looked a lot more like previous years. And I think that the big difference was Christian McCaffrey's presence back on those pass routes.
How many times did we see Jordan Mason go on similar routes while he was starting and McCaffrey was out? And at times I go, just throw it to him. But Purdy did not throw it to him. Obviously, he's not Christian McCaffrey. He's not thinking he's going to get that juke move and get 14 yards out of it. I think he could have done it more, but I understand why. It's, with Christian McCaffrey, you're just thinking McCaffrey. You're not thinking, oh my God, I need another option here. And perhaps Mason was going to drop it too. Like maybe that's factored in. With Christian McCaffrey, those defenses have to be incredibly aware of everything he does, anywhere he goes. And if you've got them leaning towards 23 on the right flat, then all of a sudden you've got Debo cutting behind the guy. That's going to be more wide open. Ricky Pearsall, right? I mean, that play was a huge yak play, and that was without McCaffrey or Debo on the field. I don't even think Kittle was on the field for that touchdown. That
was a sweet touchdown.
Yeah, that was Ricky Pearsall might be one of those yak guys. I do think
in the second gear. Did you see him kind of slow down on Winfield and then kick it into that next gear? That was
I don't know where all the fast guys were on the Tampa Bay defense for that. Like they were all pretty slow. I guess the corners were all playing up because they must have thought it was going to be a run. But that's the Shanahan offense, right? David, you always say that, right? It's the make you think it's going to be a run and then pass, make you think it's going to be a pass and then run. And they had none of their Winfield looked like he was jogging on that one. It was really bizarre because I think they both were reading each other. Pearsall was reading him. Winfield was reading Pearsall, and Pearsall just kept running. And I think he's going to be a real nice third wideout for the rest of the season. I don't know, like what it would have happened if Ayuk was healthy, but he's not healthy. I think, as Shanahan discussed, and I thought it was natural. I was saying this anyway. Like Jennings is going to be the X. That's Ayuk's position, split end, usually on the line of scrimmage, usually away from the tight end. And Debo is obviously always going to be the Z, which is off the line of scrimmage, usually lined up with the tight. Not always, but usually, and more of a space, get into the middle of field guy. Jennings is kind of the power outside receiver, and I think Pearsall is just a natural third receiver, natural slot guy, natural go find some space in the middle and maybe with some room to run. And we saw with that second gear, as you talked about, that's going to be a nice combination for the 49ers.
I think had everybody stayed healthy, Pearsall this would have been a developmental year for Pearsall.
Yeah.
But you draft him realizing that this is not like playing a video game where you could turn off the injuries. Guys probably will get hurt. So they realized they needed to layer the depth for the short term. And then Pearsall was also going to be a developing prospect for the long term. And when Brandon Ayuk tore his ACL, that's exactly what happened, right? The layered depth became really important. Now, we should talk about how good Jennings is for the 49ers. Twice now, he has had to play an entirely brand new position. He was that third receiver, the F position that you're talking about, the big, powerful outside wideout, but also played slot. He was all over the formation. He really good at his original job, but against the Rams, Debo was out, so Jennings had to play the Z for the first time. He put up nearly 200 yards. We were comparing his performance to some of Jerry Rice's best performances. That's how good it was with those 3 touchdowns at SoFi. And then on Sunday in Tampa, that was Jennings' first time playing at X because Chris Conley, who's the backup X, was also out. So they needed to move Jennings to the X, and they're not moving Jennings out of the X. And do you remember Kyle Shanahan? I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, and this caused everybody in the auditorium to raise their eyebrow. Somebody asked him about the best separator on the 49ers, and we all thought he was going to say Brandon Ayuk. He said Juwan Jennings. And that was before Juwan Jennings was getting more than 20 targets a year. That was when Juwan Jennings was this niche blocker. He said, no, Jennings knows how to control his body, create separation. He might run a 4.6 or 4.7, so he's not fast on a straight line, but he knows how to get open. And watching Jennings at the Z and now watching him at the X, the space he creates is something else. He's just skilled, right? He's not an ultra great athlete, but he's very, very talented at playing receiver. Similar to another 7th round pick that the 49ers have on offense in Brock Purdy. He's not this ultra athlete, but he knows how to play the quarterback position. And that I think is worth a lot more than running a 4.2 40.
Yeah, and it's the physicality. It really is. Like, you can take the bump, he can take the push. He can, he doesn't get off stride. In fact, the DB is going to get off stride if those two guys if there's a bump, and he can fight it. Now let's see if he gets now the second best cornerback, let's say, instead of the third best, or even a safety. Let's see what happens. It might get a little tougher, but it wasn't tougher on Sunday. I give this guy full credit. He might be the offensive MVP. Kittle might be. Purdy might be this season, but I think Jennings has been way up there. He's missed a few games, so maybe I'd give it to Kittle, but he's put up 2 of the best games. And that fumble recovery, David, you talk about game turning play. If they lose that fumble, they lose this game. They lose this game. And he was right there. I thought Purdy was going to get it back, but then someone else in red diving in. I didn't see who it was. It was Juwan, and he was like a missile in there. And he didn't do one of those dive and ops whips. I missed the ball, and it's going out. He dived, and he was right on top of it. I've said this for a while. I said this with DeForest Buckner. There's a skill towards recovering fumbles. Like, there's a talent to do that. Some people cannot do it. Some people are really, really good at it. Fred is really good at it.
Buckner was so good at it. I remember every Buckner recovery.
Oh,
that was like a moment in the limelight for you because that was your thing. Like, DeForest Buckner knows how to recover fumbles.
Falls on the ground. Who's getting it? Guess what? It's going to be DeForest Buckner because there's a skill to it. And like, how many times do you see the ball bouncing around and somebody right there and missing it? And the guys who can pick it up are pretty freaking valuable. That's my thing. DeForest Buckner, he liked me asking him about it too. So you're pretty good at this. Yeah, okay. It's like just concentrate on things. He was good at he was good at a lot of things, but chasing Kyler Murray and recovering fumbles were 2 things that, to me, I just pointed out that we lifted him above so many other guys who can't do those things.
Well, Juwan Jennings, when we talk about him always seeming to be in the right place at the right time and knowing how to on the fly succeed at new positions, I think it goes back to his background as a quarterback. He was recruited to Tennessee as a quarterback. Some of the stories of him in the Nashville area as a high school QB are just epic. I mean, taking the team down, putting the team on his back when they're down 32 points and leading a comeback. We saw his ability to throw, obviously,
Yep.
in the Super Bowl, and he had also thrown a touchdown pass in college after they converted him to receiver. But less the physical aspect and more just since the guy came up as a quarterback. You don't always see that at the receiver position, by the way. I know a lot of the best athletes play quarterback at lower levels, but especially for top X wideouts, sometimes those guys are just trained at that position their whole life. The fact that Jennings was first wired to see the whole field from the QB position, I think really pays off for what the 49ers need now with a lot of their injuries, with guys shuffling around, because he's been able to help the quarterback by assisting at, seeing it through Purdy's eyes as a wideout who's so well versed in the offense.
God,
Just
you
my
know
2 cents.
who else was a quarterback through high school and then had to convert to wide receiver when he wasn't a good enough quarterback, and he had the wiliness, but not maybe the huge physical skills to be a great wide receiver either. That'd be Kyle Shanahan.
Oh, there you go.
So
I
I don't
thought you
think
were
he
talking
was.
about a player on the Niners right now. Yeah, but that was obvious one. That's good. That's
Kyle
good.
Shanahan is like, he loves the receivers. He loves the good, tough receivers because he identifies. So that's, I couldn't even get in my column. I was like, this is one I got to get in the column in the futures. When asked about Ricky Pearsall, what kind of player do you see him as? He goes, yeah, he reminds me of myself. You could not have a bit bigger praise from Kyle Shanahan to say that Ricky Pearsall reminds him of his college days at the University of Texas as a scholarship. Turned out to be a scholarship wide receiver at Texas.
I
He
was
saw the
watching some
game as a
tape.
quarterback and then played with receiver. Like, that's an important asset.
Yeah, I was watching. I was watching some tape on YouTube of Texas back in the day, and I don't know why I wasn't looking for Shanahan tape, and all of a sudden, somebody caught the ball and they said Kyle Shanahan at the reception, and it was just cool to see because he wasn't a superstar, but he was a decently steady contributor for at least one of those seasons there. And so he's walked the walk. He's played the game, and that's the position that he coaches the hardest, right? We've talked so much about that in the receiver position, and it is because there's a little bit more of a personal connection there at receiver. We have Raul asking, why are players not wrapping up when tackling? There's so many missed tackles. I think it starts with the defensive coach. What do y'all think? First of all, they're not really high in missed tackle rate this year. They're right in the middle of the league. I think that tackling is a league-wide epidemic, or the lack of tackling. I think that when you look at the practice rules, practice time is so much shorter now, camp, OTAs, but also there's no tackling to the ground anymore. I mean, tackling used to be something that teams, football players practiced essentially year round. And that's definitely not the case anymore. You only tackle in live action now. And for some of these guys, live action is only happening during actual regular season games. So combine that with the fact that defenses in general, Tim, over the last 20 years have downsized. Speed has become a bigger asset. It's become a less physical game than it used to be. I just don't think the tackling is as much of an emphasis just for that reason. You don't practice it as much. So a lot of teams fans will be upset because they do see missed tackles, but guess what? Other teams are missing tackles as well. That's why the 49ers, one of the reasons why the 49ers have been the top yak team in the league in every
Yeah.
single
And I
season up
will say
until this one.
the 49ers are not one of the worst tackling teams. They are actually one of the better tackling teams. You got Fred Warner, you've got Diamond Lenore is just a hell of a tackler for a cornerback. He
Mhm.
sticks his head in there. They got some other very good tacklers. They got some misses. It happens. A lot of the misdirection stuff, you're getting guys coming at you at speed. I don't think this is a huge part of it, but it is some. Is you got these penalties they're being called on. You can't do the hip drop anymore. Now everyone thinks every tackle from behind is hip drop, which it is not. I argue it is not. That is not the hip drop. The hip drop is grabbing somebody and then twisting and making sure you land on their legs. That's the definition of hip drop. You are still allowed to tackle people from behind. You must be able to tackle people from behind if it's still football. But I think as Bosa, when he was doing that arm twist with Baker Mayfield, he said one of the reasons, he couldn't get him down is he didn't want a horse collar. Like, you can't do some of these things. It's in their head. We saw it with the Patrick Mahomes run down the sideline when he's like, is he going to go out? Is he not going to go out? And D. Winters whiffs on him because he thinks he's going to ease up and go out of bounds, and he doesn't. Yet if he takes one step out of bounds while you're making the hit and you hit him, that could be 15 going the other way. I think some of this is a little bit of kind of hesitancy to pick up some of these 15-yard flags. Some of it is poor like college coaching. I hate to say it, but I used to joke with some people, I'll say personnel people, that you knew if you got a USC defensive player, you had to coach that garbage out of them because they would go on these flying crazy tackles because they all thought they were,
Taylor Mays.
Yeah. Well, no comment on if that was exactly the person we were talking about.
Did I guess? Oh my God, I was a guess. I swear.
Yeah, that was in the era of another era. But yeah, it was. All some of these SC guys wanted to do was make this Troy Polamalu tackle, and only Troy Polamalu can do the Troy Polamalu tackle. And I just think you see some poor technique in certain college situations, and they got to get it out of them in the pros, and then they got to relearn how to tackle. The Pete Carroll way, interestingly, was kind of the hip drop, right? That was the Seahawks tackling, which I agree. I think it's a great way to tackle, but sometimes it leads to the hip drop. Just this interesting kind of things, all these rules that are thrown at defensive players, and I think has caused some of this, where guys are a little cautious, a little hesitant, a little not sure what to do, and it leads to some misses. And I'll just say, I don't think I watch a lot of football games, and I don't think the 49ers are the worst case of this in any way. Not when you have 54 flying around out there.
And
he'll miss a tackle or two, but his technique is really good.
The numbers back you up as well. They're not one of the worst teams in the league. The 49ers tackling percentage has been very correlated with rest. So the worst tackling games that they've had have been right before their bye week. We saw that last year for sure. That game against the Bengals, they had like 20 missed tackles, but then they came out of the bye week and they were fresh and they were good to go. And they're actually a good tackling team the rest of the way. So that's definitely not something that I would say is true. I think that it's often the thing where you watch your team and you stress out about your team and you see them have an issue like a missed tackle, but you forget that everybody else is having that issue and they may even be having more of it. And I think that's the case in terms of tackle. Speaking of linebackers flying around, maybe some penalties every once in a while. Somebody asked about Dre Greenlaw. What's up with Dre Greenlaw? The 49ers are evaluating him on a week-by-week basis. This week, probably no, as far as a return goes to practice at least. But he was already doing some sprints last week. I caught that on the broadcast replay. We didn't see him last week out of practice doing sprints, but Kevin Burkhardt and Tom Brady were talking about it. So Greenlaw is sprinting now on the field, and Shanahan has said that they're considering it every week, and that's going to be the opening of the practice window. As soon as they do that, they'll have 3 weeks to formally activate him to the 53-man roster. But guess who's playing good football? His 2 best games, Devondre Campbell, the last 2 games. He definitely looked like a fish out of water early this season, but he thumped this last game in Tampa. And Kyle Shanahan said that, yeah, by far he's looked his best the past 2 games, which is a luxury for the 49ers, Tim, because they don't have to push Dre Greenlaw back faster than he needs to go. And when Dre comes back, maybe he can even be the guy taking 15 snaps a game as a third linebacker. And as soon as he's ready to move into linebacker 2, he moves there. And you've got a solid linebacker 3 in Devondre Campbell. So I think this is going according to plan. I mean, the guy tore his Achilles in the Super Bowl, which is the worst possible time to do it. So that's as late as possible as it could have been last year.
Yeah, I've been pointing to after the Buffalo game. So that's 3 games from now because they got the Seahawks at home, at Green Bay, at Buffalo. I don't know if you want to throw Dre Greenlaw in his first game, go chase, Josh Allen around.
It's turf too, right?
Yeah, that's their last artificial turf game. So, you bring him back after that game. You have 4 grass games to close the season. And you get him in that way. I just think that makes sense to me. It makes sense just on the timeline of, it's like 11 months after the injury. Achilles tend to be 10, 11, 12-month injuries before going full speed. And you want them for the final games. You want them for the playoffs. You want them at top speed by then. 4 weeks feels right. Really, those games really could make a difference, right? You got Detroit and you've got Arizona are your two of the last two games. I know Arizona is the last game. Uh, to have a even 90% Dre Greenlaw for those games, that would be pretty important. That would be pretty good for them. I don't think you want to jeopardize that by pushing him out there too early. And I just don't think they want to see a guy coming off an Achilles tear running around on artificial turf in Buffalo. I would just say the week after that is where I'd look for it.
I had not realized that about the no artificial turf
None.
games the rest of the regular season after Buffalo. That makes for a natural segue. It really does. And so does Devondre Campbell's play. Campbell had played in a very similar scheme under Dan Quinn before in Atlanta. So it didn't take him a full season to get used to what the 49ers were doing. It took him a couple months because he was with Green Bay. They were running something different there. So now it seems like he's back at home. And I was impressed. It was a couple eyebrow raisers in Tampa Bay. Campbell in space making the play. Obviously, he's not in his prime anymore. He was an all-pro guy in 2021. He's not a Fred Warner. He's not at that level, but you don't need that. You need somebody that's at a replacement level at that second linebacker position. Maybe he'll even be able to give them a little bit more than that now that he's comfortable. Where I do think that they're still sketchy right now is that third linebacker spot. Saw Bucky Irving on his touchdown run. If you had D Winters was coming in from the side, and I thought it was a very makeable play, and he kind of just let up, and Bucky Irving ended up scoring from 20 yards out, and it was like, okay, I get it now. That the teams that have great linebacker play across the board, and the 49ers had that luxury a couple years ago when they still had Azeez Al-Shire. He was their number 3. Those are the teams that aren't giving up rushing touchdowns like that, because that third linebacker in the base defense is making plays. He's not just a guy, and the 49ers aren't at that level yet, but there's potential if Greenlaw comes back and is even just 80% of his former self, and you have Campbell improving, they could have 3 solid linebackers by the time they're heading into the playoffs, which I think would be huge for this defense.
I think it'd be necessary if they're looking at themselves. How do they make a Super Bowl run? It's got to be with Dre Greenlaw making plays, and the defense has been fine. And I think you and I both noted that it's not been great. I think they're now they're top half in yards per play, top half, and a lot of other stats. They've been very good in DVOA and other things, but there's been some leakage. The pass rush isn't as great as it's been, and that's understandable.
And the run defense.
The run defense is definitely got hit yesterday. I got hit on Sunday, but Dre Greenlaw makes a lot of that turn the other way if he's coming at speed. And he only heightens what Fred Warner can do, and he only heightens what everyone else can do. It's hard for me to picture this team in the Super Bowl without Dre Greenlaw playing some significant role. And if he cannot get to that level, it's going to be hard for me to see. They're going to have to win on the road in the playoffs. Anyway, we know that. If they get in the playoffs, they're going to get in as a maybe division winner. You get the first game at home, but then everything else will be on the road at Detroit or at Minnesota or at whoever else you're going to be at Washington, maybe, who knows, but more likely at Philadelphia. Like, these are tough games, and you need to bring your defense for those games, and they're going to need Dre Greenlaw. We'll see about Hufanga, another SC guy, another SC safety for you, Dave. You can see if you can. You still get me on the Taylor Mays one. That was good. I hated to like.
The first thing I thought of that was back when I was at Stanford and I was calling the games for the student radio station, was still Pete Carroll, at least at the start of that era, and they had Taylor Mays, and he almost decapitated Evan Moore, who was a Stanford wide receiver, turned into a broadcaster after, and we just saw it was just a ferocious hit, but it was a highlight reel hit. There was no wrapping up on the play, and it worked because he had the athletic advantage. And I knew when I saw that this guy's going to get drafted by somebody. I didn't know that it'd be the 49ers at that point. I kind of, the first red flag with that might have been, why didn't Pete Carroll take him? Because Carroll had a chance with Seattle, and he didn't.
He took Earl Thomas. He took Earl Thomas.
He took Earl Thomas, somebody who was able to deliver the highlight hit, but also was able to cover and wrap up. But Taylor Mays, it was so much athletic sizzle, but it didn't translate to the pro game. And that goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Sometimes it's just about fundamentally making the play, because guess what? Everybody at this level is fast. Everybody at this level is strong, right? That even the weakest athletes in the NFL were the best athletes on their their college teams. So it does come down to the details. That's the difference between the guys the last 2 years in the league and the guys that can have those 10-year careers is the very, very intricate details. Somebody like Christian McCaffrey is so dialed in on that. How about that? What did that look like to you? Christian's first game back. I didn't know what to expect really because bilateral Achilles tendonitis, 271 days since he had last played. I thought that the fact that he was able to go back in there and execute on so many timing plays, that just shows you how hard this guy studies. I mean, the fact that Purdy and him were able to connect on that rainbow shot, it was almost like they'd been playing together for 10 straight weeks this year, but they hadn't been. But that's just who Christian McCaffrey is, and that's why he's such a valuable piece of this offense.
Yeah, it did. I mean, I thought he looked really good. It did not surprise me because that was part of this whole thing was they had to have him back off of practicing, right? That was
Mhm.
like the injury was such that he could make it worse because he practices so hard. So I wasn't like thinking he wasn't going to be in rhythm because that guy stayed and makes sure he's in rhythm. That guy studies it so hard. We all know they acquired him on a Tuesday and he played on a Sunday, in 2022. Like this guy is someone who's special about preparation and about commitment. And he runs hard. And so I was like, is he going to get winded? Like, is he going to be someone who clearly looks like he needs to get out of the game? He might, maybe he drops the football because he's tired. And that never was the case. And as Shanahan explained it, which made sense, like they did not have the ball a lot in the third quarter. So he got a lot of rest. He played a ton in the fourth quarter because they had the ball a lot. They kept getting the ball and driving for missed field goals. But like you couldn't take him off the field. Like, why would you take him off the field? He played a lot of plays, but he did get that rest in the third quarter. And I never thought he looked tired. And, he didn't get the big pop run, which we're so used to, which they always think they're going to get with him and which we've seen him get. But it'll come. I didn't think it was for lack of his speed or lack of, anything other than the guys were there to tackle him. But I thought he looked good, and I thought like this guy is going to be ready to be making some big plays very soon. And obviously the reception from Purdy was a very big one. And like, I was just impressed that when I saw it, I was thinking, I bet you Purdy had to throw that before McCaffrey was open. McCaffrey
Oh
was
yeah,
not in front
of
of
Levante
Levante David.
David.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
was like, not hasn't even made the move yet. But Purdy realizing he's got the hot rusher right in his face. There was a blocking breakdown, and he's got to get rid of it. He can't wait for McCaffrey to get open, so he just lofted up, counting on him getting open, and he got way open because he's Christian McCaffrey, and Levante David was not going to be able to stay with him on that move.
It's tough to watch. I think Levante David was a great back when he was younger. It's tough to watch those guys when they're losing their powers. There was the George Kittle catch and run. Levante David just looked silly. He just
Yeah, not in coverage. He was great in run. He's
and
great against the run, but
he's still a
not in
good
coverage.
run linebacker, yeah, but in coverage they can. I think Ted Nguyen said posted that clip of Kittle. He's like, I see Levante David considering retirement with this play right here when he has to deal with a monster like
It's
Kittle or
tough. It's tough.
covering Christian McCaffrey. But yes, Tampa Bay was still very good against the run. The defense is eroded a lot because I think of age. There's some mileage on some of those players. David is a great example. They don't have the edge rush that they used to have. So the 49ers were able to take advantage of them in the pass game. Purdy threw for 353. Moving forward to wrap up, one more question here. Renardo Green's toe injury is a day-to-day injury. It doesn't seem that serious. I would expect him to be available on Sunday. And there's a chance that Charvarius Ward is back with the team as well. So that is all for the game against the Seattle Seahawks. This is a big week, Tim.
Big game.
Seattle coming in. It's the first of the divisional rematches. 49ers have played the other three NFC West teams once now. They get to play all three once more. So Seattle here, and then the Rams in December, and the Cardinals, who are the leaders right now, in January. But this is a really good chance for the 49ers to now, they just now won consecutive games for the first time. They're favored to make it three in a row. I look at this in a bigger picture, and I see a gauntlet. I see trips to Green Bay and Buffalo coming up after this, which I think makes defending the home field all the more
Oh yeah.
important this week against Seattle.
You got to win your division games. Really got to do it when you're 5-4. And knowing those two games are coming up, you got to give yourself a little breathing room. That's why the Tampa game was so huge, right? They blow that, and you've got these three games coming up where you could easily go 1-2. They should go 1-2 at the worst. You got to get a Tampa game in your pocket. You have to. Now they got to get this one, and then maybe steal one, in the Green Bay Buffalo scenario. If they get both, all of a sudden you're talking about a playoff team. But given the way this 49er season has gone, I don't think you can count on that. You just got to pile up conference and division wins. The Buffalo game's been the one, that would be the one they most would be able to lose. You still want to win it, but it's out of conference, out of division. You just can't, with the way the Cardinals are playing, and they do have a much easier schedule the rest of the way the 49ers do. But again, 49ers had an easy part of their schedule that they screwed up. So, you can't just always base it on strength of schedule. You base it on how well you're playing and how well your opponent's playing at the moment you face each other. But this is big. You want to, I have said, I think they got to win every division game the rest of the way. They absolutely have to, in my opinion. And then they see where they're at after. Try to get to 10 or 11 wins. I think that if they get to 10 or 11, they will be looking pretty good for at least a wild card spot. And you try to win a division, and you see where you are after that. They've screwed up so many games this year. They've put themselves in this position. You cannot get to a spot where, that loss is okay. You cannot get there, especially when you got at Green Bay, at Buffalo coming up back to back.
Yeah. I mean, they're 5-4 right now. And when we started talking about special teams, you could say if they had just been okay, they could have been 7-2, but they're not. They put themselves behind this 8 ball due to some of those lapses early in the season. So it's going to be interesting. The 49ers, again, I opened this by saying that they were a 500, or they've been a 500 team over the past 3 years before the bye, and they've been about an 800 team after the bye. 31-8 is now their record, and they're going to go for 32-8 with a potential win against Seattle on Sunday. We'll see if they can do it. They handled Seattle well up in the Pacific Northwest, but this is a whole new story, whole new game. We've hit the hour, Tim. This has been fun.
1 hour blows by very, very quick, very fast, and only about 53 minutes for special teams. So we'll do 54 minutes on special teams next time.
Unless special teams, I mean, it's a thankless job, because if special teams does its job, then they don't get many thanks. You kind of just ignore them, right? It's like good pass protection on the offensive line. And I'm sure Kyle Shanahan would love for people to just forget about special teams. So it's going to happen this week. Whatever happens is going to happen against a team that has in the past victimized the 49ers on special teams a lot, Seattle, when Brian Schneider was their coordinator.
Yes,
of all
there
people.
you go.
So
there you go.
It's all full circle. All right, cool stuff. For Tim, this is David. Everybody subscribe or check out the San Francisco Standard. Go sign up at the San Francisco Standard.
Subscription might become later.
Yeah, that's a little bit later, but you can go sign up for little alerts whenever our articles do come out, and you could put yourself on the email list. Just go to sfstandard.com. All right, Tim, thanks again.
All right, Dave. Thank you. See you.
All right, everybody have a good day. We'll see you later.